Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Bate, joined as always by Ricardo Martinez Paz, and we've got another jam-packed episode for you. The last episode before we officially have Steelers and Eagles football back. Not the preseason, not the roster cutdowns, nothing like that. We've got real hardcore Steeler and Eagle football coming at you. Basically a week away at this point. Games are starting up Thursday. Then we've got our first NFL regular season Sunday slate of games. So we're getting into it today. We're obviously going to preview the week one games a little bit, talk about the rosters being finalized, both teams making a couple trades, and also giving you our record and standing predictions for both the Steelers and Eagles. So that being said, Ricardo, how we feeling, man? We are so close to having real NFL football back.
Oh, I'm so excited, dude. Like, literally, it's just like today hit me like so hard. I'm just like, oh my God, we're 3 days away, 6 days away from from Sunday. So it's gonna be good. Oh my God, it's 18 weeks plus of Sunday football. Man, doesn't get better than that.
Dude, and we were just talking about it too, the fact that like we have so Ricardo and I are in a fantasy football league that we've been doing since we both got to college together. And we have our draft tomorrow. We always save it late for after preseason, everything like that, just for injuries and on things along those lines. But I mean, I'm excited for our fantasy football draft tomorrow. And then you talk about all of a sudden, you blink and then Thursday we've got Bills Rams to open up the season. So it is really, it's go time. NFL's back, baby.
Oh yeah, absolutely, so close, man. Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. And I guess we will jump right into some of the stuff we're talking about today. And that is starting with both the Steelers and Eagles finalizing their rosters. I know the Steelers just released their finalized practice squad today of 16 players. And both teams made some interesting trades to start things off. I don't know. Do we want to jump into the trades first real quick here? I have a couple notes on just what the Steelers and Eagles both did roster-wise, but I think the trades are definitely the main storyline.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, well, I don't think there was any bigger trade than what the Eagles did with with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, so why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Man, I could not believe it. Let me tell you, I put this in my takeaways that when I saw that Anthony Harris got cut, I was like, what is going on? I was like, we're not going in with Kayvon Wallace as our number 2 safety. Then a few minutes later, the trade comes up, and I'm just like, wow. Just like Howie Roseman, of course, there was a reason behind there was a method to his madness with cutting Anthony Harris. And I was like, wow, that's a huge upgrade already. In terms of the details, I believe it was what? The exact details on it were
I got it here. It was Gardner Johnson, and the Eagles also get a 2025 7th-round pick in exchange for a 2023 5th-round pick and a 2024 6th-round pick that go back to the Saints.
Yeah. So I was like, that's pretty good for a player who's in his last year of his rookie deal. I don't see us giving an extension for this season, but still a really good upgrade overall to play alongside Marcus Epps. And then Kayvon Wallace, Reed Blankenship behind them. So that was a huge move, and I love that already. I already had huge question marks about the safeties, and I feel a bit more secure about them now. I'm just hoping that, injuries don't affect us too much. But, really, really good trade overall on Howie Roseman's part.
I thought this was a fantastic trade. It really doesn't feel like you gave up that much, really, at all. I don't know why the Saints necessarily did it. I don't think it makes a ton of sense for them. Obviously, I guess this was kind of them saying, hey, we're not going to be trading him, or we're not going to be re-signing him at the end of the season, so let's get rid of him and get what we can. But still, I don't know if that is necessarily the best logic. And I think that you probably could have gotten even more for him, given the caliber player he is and the fact that he still does have 1 year of control left. So, for the Eagles, props to Howie Roseman. This is the one position group that on the defensive side of the ball that we said could be a weakness for the Eagles, and they addressed it in a big way. And the fact that he's kind of in a hybrid role, you can move him all over the field, reminds me of Minkah Fitzpatrick a little bit, in the sense that you're going to utilize him in all different looks. You're going to, line him up against some of the more talented players on the opposing offense, and you could play him in the slot if you want to. So he's really versatile. And what do you think of the fact that he plays with such an edge? That's been one of the things that's been noted, is how aggressive and how physical, and even starting fights with his own teammates in
Yeah.
practices and stuff like that. I mean, what do you make of the flair he plays with?
I was actually about to say that, like reading the stuff on how he loves to like chirp, he loves to talk trash, even to like head coaches. I'm like, playing with that kind of edge, it gives your teammates like confidence. I feel like it gives a sort of like elevates play a little bit. That's how I see it. I mean, that's something I feel like a lot of players on the Eagles defense don't necessarily have. Like they're not very, it's not visible. I guess like it might
Yeah.
be internal, but with Gardner Johnson, I mean, it's very noticeable. That dude is just hungry, loves to play. Loves to get under players' skins, coaches' skins, even. But no, that's awesome. That he brings a sort of different element in that back defensive backfield. So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
I think that having a guy who has that flair, and a little bit of a dramatic like that, it's gonna fit Philadelphia really well.
Oh
Because
yeah,
obviously it's with the fan base and everything like that. I think that if he performs well early on and he's playing with that fire, the fans are gonna latch on to him really quickly, and he's gonna become a fan favorite. So
oh I
I'm
hope
with
so.
you. I think it was a fantastic trade that the Eagles pulled off as they were cutting down their roster.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so I don't know if we want to talk about let's actually just keep going with the Eagles and the other two moves that they made from the outside. The one was Jalen Rager dishing him out to the Vikings in exchange for a 2023 seventh rounder and a 2024 conditional fourth rounder. I mean, the writing was on the wall that Jalen Rager's time in Philadelphia was coming to an end. But I don't know. I thought this was more than the Eagles were going to get from him. I thought this was very fair compensation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you saw the thing where it's like Amari Cooper. I mean, the Cowboys received less for Amari Cooper than the Eagles did for Jalen Rager, which is
Yeah,
outrageous. But I mean, yeah, no, yeah, there was definitely a lot more than I was expecting. But I mean, it's funny that he's now in the Vikings where the Eagles passed up on Justin Jefferson. Now he's playing alongside him. That I find that really funny. But yeah, no, that I knew that. Like I think we were talking about that. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised the Eagles kept him up until like the roster cut downs,
hmm
and then he gets traded. That's pretty much what ended up happening. And what the only thing that I noticed from the roster currently is that there are only four receivers. I'm sure that's going to change, but I mean, we got practice squad players who could fill that role for of Rager's, Covey, maybe even Devin Allen if you want as that fifth receiver.
even Dion
Deion
Kane is
Kane
still
as
on the
well.
practice
Yeah,
squad
so
still.
you
Yeah.
got some quality players back there. Although maybe they'll consider bringing in a veteran. But overall, I thought that was also a really good trade for how much of a bust he was in Philly. But yeah,
Yeah,
Howie
no, I
Roseman
mean,
again.
Howie Roseman traded him at the perfect time because this was his best training camp, probably as high as his value was going to be at any
Yeah,
point this season. And I mean, to get that return is pretty bonkers, especially when you compare it to what obviously the what the Cowboys only got up for Amari Cooper. Granted the contract was a bit different, but I
right.
mean,
Yeah,
still
absolutely.
for the caliber of player, it's pretty insane. So
Oh
again,
yeah,
another great trade by Howie Roseman here. When you knew that eventually Rieger's time in Philadelphia was coming to an end sooner or later.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And then, I mean, the last little minor move that the Eagles made, we talked about this of whether or not they were going to keep a third quarterback on the roster. They moved Reed Sinet to the practice squad, and then they brought in Ian Book. I'm curious what you think of this, what you make of it, if it was even necessary. I've always been a Notre Dame guy. I like Notre Dame a lot as far as
right.
like the school. So I like seeing Ian Book get picked up after obviously the Saints moved on from him. But I don't know. What'd you think? He's a former third rounder. He's got some talent. I mean, he's going to be your third string quarterback. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think he has more upside than Sinet does. Reed Sinet does.
Yeah.
So at least there's that. But the thing that bothers me is that he's on the active roster right now. So we can't really waive him. I mean, there's always that chance that some team's going to claim him. So that'd kind of be pointless if we were just to have him on the roster then just to waive him. I don't know. I don't like that they have a third quarterback on the roster. I feel like that's just a waste, especially when you have Gardner Minshew, who's a capable backup behind Jalen Hurts. Like you're just going to scratch him on game day. Like I don't understand that part of it. But I mean, I thought it was a quality pickup. I just didn't think he'd be on the active roster.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure we talked about this last episode, but Sirianni's always liked to have three quarterbacks on his
Yeah.
roster. So, maybe that's just part of it. And they just didn't feel Reed Sinet was at that caliber. And I mean, I'm with you. I do think that Ian Book is a better player right now, and he has more upside than Reed Sinet. So, I guess to have him on the roster, if you're going to have three quarterbacks, it might as well be him over, keeping someone like Sinet just to have a third.
Yeah, I guess. But again, I still think that's a waste of a roster spot. We could have that as like fill that in with like a safety, defensive back, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Or I mean
mean,
that fifth wide receiver.
that too. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a couple more changes before the season. I mean, before the Eagles play against the Lions Sunday.
So did you have any other roster notes from the Eagles cut down? Whether it was, I know we talked about the four wide receivers and we briefly touched on Anthony Harris, getting waived and then ultimately re-signing with the practice squad. Was there anything else that caught your eyes?
There are a couple other things. I mean, the one with offensive lineman Jack Anderson getting waived and the
Mhm.
Eagles keeping Josh Sills as the
Yeah.
backup instead. That was a shock to me. And of course, now he's on the Giants. Anderson is. That's annoying, but whatever. I mean, the Giants kind of need offensive line depth, so whatever. Good for them for getting Jack Anderson. He's pretty solid. Um, yeah, so Josh Sills, that was the biggest shock in terms of offensive line. Then the Eagles also waived Davion Taylor, linebacker. I think
Yeah.
it was his third year, but I mean he's on the practice squad. But I was sort of expecting. I mean, I'm not surprised that they did that. I think a little more surprised that no one tried to claim him, perhaps. But I mean, he's still. I mean, he's on the practice squad, like I said. So I mean, he'll be there just to, like as a backup in case someone gets injured or something like that. But yeah, didn't end up preseason that well. I mean, struggled in the last three games. I mean, in the last two games. I mean, it was really bad. Like he played his way out of the roster essentially, as we talked about a couple episodes ago. But the other thing I thought was noticeable or notable, Trey Sermon. The
Mm.
Eagles claimed him. That was he's also on the active roster actually, as the fourth running back behind Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, um, and who am I blanking on?
Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting that we have four running backs on the roster too. With Trey Sermon, I mean, that was a surprise wave from the 49ers part. I'm kind of glad the Eagles
Yeah.
claimed him, but um,
Especially there
yeah,
was so much talk last year about him really like bursting onto the scene and being such a factor. But I
yeah,
mean, yeah, now that he's been released from I mean, I think he was a third round pick of theirs
yeah, it
just
was.
last year. So I mean,
Hmm.
that's a big mistake that they're kind of admitting to already, for whatever
Yeah,
reason. And yeah, I mean, hey, the Eagles take a chance on him, and when you have one of the most prolific, rushing attacks in the NFL, and you love to run the ball as frequently as the Eagles do, I mean, there you go. Now you've got another weapon at Nick Sirianni's disposal to potentially use. One other question I had for you
hmm.
um, about what the Eagles decided to do with their roster, and it's just slipping my mind now, but I should have wrote it down. Um,
Did it have to do with the Josh
oh,
Joe?
with
No.
well with Jalen Rieger now leaving, so
Oh,
what
okay.
does that leave for the situation as far as kicks and punt returns go? You think it's all in on Kenny Gainwell being that guy at this point?
I mean, I think so at this point. Yeah. I mean, I looked at the roster and it said that he was designated for kick returns. Although punt returns still open at the moment, so that was
Yeah,
interesting too. But it's probably going to be kind of getting well.
I'd imagine it's Gainwell at this point, but
Yeah. I mean,
mhm.
there's not.
Unless they do ultimately call up that fifth wide receiver, like you kind of said, if they were to
Yeah,
do that before the season starts, and maybe it's Covey,
maybe, but I
because
feel like
obviously he's
that.
done it. But yeah, we talked about he hasn't really done a lot to warrant it at this
Yeah,
point.
exactly. So I mean, it's open. I mean, we'll see what happens in week one, but yeah, that's again, that's the position that's has the biggest question mark, and it's probably the worst position group out of all of them on the team. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's whatever. It is what it is.
I'm sorry, I just got a notification. Not really breaking news, but this is regarding the Steelers. Mitch Trubisky was just named the team captain, but still no word on if he's quarterback one. So
Oh, great!
I don't know. I don't know why Mike Tomlin continues to drag this out. I
Just
honestly
say
think the
it
only
already.
I know I think the only reason might be because if he names Trubisky the starter, then he's just gonna have to answer the questions about, all right, well, who's your backup then? Is it going to be Pickett or Rudolph? And I think
Yeah,
maybe he's just trying to push that off. But I mean, clearly, if Trubisky's being named a captain, he's going to be the Week One starter. So
yeah. Also,
that's fully the direction they're going.
there's one other thing that just came out. The Eagles and Anthony Harris mutually agreed to terminate his squad contract to maximize his flexibility to join another team's roster, per Schefter. So, I mean, I actually didn't even realize he was on the practice squad, but um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's
Well,
gone now.
yeah. I mean, I would have. I was a little surprised when they did keep him on the practice squad that no other team was willing to take a chance on him that needed some help
Safety,
at safety.
yeah,
But yeah, all right. I mean,
Two
yeah,
things.
it's like the Steelers. I mean, the Eagles upgraded at the safety position, and
Yeah,
he didn't have the best preseason and training camp, so it
yeah,
is what
especially
it is. I mean, I
yeah,
guess wish him the best of luck, but I
yeah.
mean, do you now that you know that he's out there and he's going to be, obviously pursuing another team? Do you wish that the Eagles had kept him as a depth safety over someone like Reed Blankenship or Kayvon Wallace? Or are you fine with this move and what they decided to do ultimately with the safety position?
I would have rather kept Harris over Kayvon Wallace, if anything, but I mean, can't really change that now. But I mean,
Yeah,
Reed Blankenship's shown he's a tackling machine. I mean, he's developing pretty nicely.
yeah.
I mean, Kayvon Wallace is sort of the odd man out, and we sort of alluded to that in prior episodes. But he's on the team, so
He did enough to stick around, and I guess
yeah,
that is more, if anything, shows how the Eagles organization felt about Anthony Harris at this stage.
yeah, exactly. But we move.
So yeah, we'll move on to some of the trades that Pittsburgh made. And the first one that was kind of the big one was acquiring outside linebacker Malik Reed and a seventh round pick from the Broncos in exchange for a sixth round pick.
Yeah.
So this was great for the Steelers. It was again a position on their defense that was really probably had the least amount of depth. Um,
Hmm.
I talked in volume about how I thought it was weird that they cut Jannard Avery when they did.
Hmm.
Ultimately, Avery ended up sticking around with the Buccaneers on their practice squad. Didn't make their active roster, but re-signed on their practice squad. So the Steelers go out and get Malik Reed. I thought it was a great pickup. You didn't have to give up a lot. I mean, honestly, it was basically you swapped a sixth round pick for a seventh round pick,
Yeah.
and in exchange, you also get Malik Reed. So I was honestly, I was more than happy with the trade, and he's a perfect fit because he'll be a perfect rotational piece behind Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt at the outside linebacker position. And he's
Hmm.
also got some upside too. He was an undrafted free agent a few years ago, but he's still only 26 years old and he's put up some sack numbers the last 2 years. In 2020, he had 8 sacks, and then last year in 2021, he had 5 sacks. So he's nothing over the top great, but that's not what the Steelers needed. And
Yeah.
honestly, he's an upgrade over what Jannard Avery or Derek Tuska or Delonte Scott or what any of those guys would have given you at the outside linebacker position behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. So I'm very
Hmm.
happy with this pickup. My housemate at college is a Broncos fan, and he said he was pretty disappointed in the trade.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they gave up Malik Reed, but that was all that they could get in return for him. So I'm happy with the trade, and I like this piece, and I think it's a perfect rotational piece, excuse me, behind Watt and Highsmith.
Yeah, I was a little confused with the in terms of picks from the Broncos' point of view, but I mean, yeah, no, but I think the Steelers won that trade definitely.
Yeah,
So I sort of do agree with the person you live with in that sense, but yeah, it's like
yeah.
you said, quality depth where it's needed. So it feels a need essentially.
I also like from what I read, the only reason that the Broncos really did it was to open up a spot for one of their rookies. I forget what his name was. It was like Benito or something. To
Mm,
now start now that they got rid of Malik Reed. But again, this is kind of like the same logic as the Saints, like getting rid of CJ, like Gardner
yeah,
Johnson. Like, are these really good enough reasons to give up like these very valuable pieces for next to nothing, essentially?
no,
I don't know. I feel like you could either wait a little bit longer to potentially deal them when maybe you have a little bit more leverage and a team is a little bit more desperate. But
hmm,
I mean, I don't know. Hey, the Steelers and Eagles both benefit from it, and he's going to fit perfectly
yeah, exactly.
in the Steelers defense. And then while we're on the outside linebackers, the Steelers also another minor move. They claimed Jameer Jones off waivers and released Derek Tuska. He's going to be the fourth outside linebacker on the depth chart. He's got familiarity with the organization because he actually played 3 games with them before getting cut in favor of Derek Tuska last year, actually. And then he ended up sticking with the Rams for about 10 games. And, it's fine. It's another depth piece. Fourth outside linebacker. I guess the Steelers viewed him as a better option than Tuska or Delonte Scott or Hamilcar Rashed. So they go with that decision. And I think part of it, too, is that last year, out of his 362 snaps, 250 of them came on special teams. So he's got the potential to contribute there. So I think that's, probably part of the reason that they brought him in. And again, he's another depth piece at the outside linebacker position. So the Steelers have really made some moves to shore that up a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Again, filling a need in terms of depth. So I mean, yeah, I mean, like you said, with both of them, they're not like over the top players. They're just good quality backups to have in case someone goes down. Hopefully not,
Yeah,
but
yeah. And I think Malik Reed is like the perfect fit because last year the Steelers tried to do that with Melvin Ingram. The fit
Yeah.
wasn't good. He wanted out. He forced his way out with the trade.
Yeah.
But I think trading for a younger player in Malik Reed, I think it's going to work well, and I think the Steelers are going to be able to have a lot more confidence in what they have beyond Watt and Highsmith. And then
Mhm.
the last trade that the Steelers made addressed the offensive line a little bit, but it's not like it was anything great. So they traded for Jesse Davis, who was an versatile offensive lineman from the Vikings. He can play guard and tackle. The Vikings, in exchange, got a conditional seventh round pick, so the Steelers didn't really give up much. Um, but that's really the best thing you could say about him is that he's versatile. He started 15 games. He started at least 15 games the last 4 seasons. So, he's gotten starter reps, but when you peel back the curtain a little bit, it's not that great. Last year he had a 52.5 PFF grade. He allowed 8 sacks and had 4 penalties against him. So I mean, he's going to come in. He's essentially, it's an interesting spot because I think that he becomes essentially your backup tackle and essentially your backup guard as well.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason it's interesting is you kind of push Kendrick Green to a place where he's almost like completely unnecessary on the Steelers roster.
Yeah.
I mean, Kendrick Green was your backup left guard. Well, Jesse Davis probably overtakes him there. You've got
Mhm.
J.C. Hassenauer as your backup center.
Yep.
So he's your third string center. Kendrick Green can't play right guard. He's never played it before in the NFL.
Yeah.
So that kind of eliminates that. So I mean, really, what's Kendrick Green's purpose on this team? And his stats were worse last year than Jesse Davis. And we all know I've talked a lot about how poor Kendrick Green has played this preseason. So really, I don't know what his purpose is on the Steelers roster. And I think the only reason he's really on the roster anymore is the fact that the Steelers did use a third round pick on him, and they're not ready to admit the mistake that drafting him was.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those players who's just scratched out on game day, Kendrick Green. But I mean, yeah, I mean, what can you do? I guess just other than keep him there. Kind
Yeah,
of
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I guess it adds a little bit of depth here. That the fact that you have him kind of down the depth chart a little bit,
I
but
guess, but like not really if he's only limited
no,
to certain positions. So
exactly. And it's just disappointing that for a third round pick, he's literally regressed from where he
yeah,
was last year to this year. And yeah, I mean, I just don't think I think like what you said, he just doesn't have a role really on this team on a game day anymore. And it's not like Jesse Davis is a big upgrade, but he's
yeah,
got experience, and he's much more versatile than Kendrick Green is. So
yeah.
um, that's pretty much all for what Pittsburgh did regarding trade. Just a couple other roster notes. They did put DeMonte Casey and Calvin Austin on short-term IR.
Mm,
The good news on Casey is supposedly he could be back as soon as like week 5 or 6.
mm,
I thought it was going to be longer than that. He'd be out until after the bye week, but both of
hmm.
those guys, it looks like will be back soon enough. And on the flip side of that, Montravius Adams, Miles Killebrew, and Marcus Allen, all who were also dealing with some minor injuries, they ended up staying on the 53-man roster, didn't go on the IL. So, I keep saying IL like it's baseball. The IR,
Baseball,
excuse me.
yeah.
Um, so they'll be on the 53-man active roster. The only real surprises, I guess you could say, I already talked about Jannard Avery, but he didn't even make an active roster.
Yeah,
And Joe Haig also getting cut. But with
yeah,
Joe Haig getting cut, you bring in Jesse Davis, who's essentially a similar player that's more versatile. So really nothing shocking. And like the Eagles, the Steelers go into the regular season in pretty good shape health wise. So
hmm,
so they will be yeah, getting things off this Sunday. And I don't have much more to add on the Steelers. And I think we can move on to the next part of the episode here, which is the record predictions for both the Steelers and the Eagles, and as well as the standing projections.
oh boy. Ooh, this is a good. Okay, so how are we trying to do this?
I think we've got to go one team at a time and just kind of, go either game by game briefly or break it down into chunks of the schedule. So, do you want to start with the Eagles here? I have their schedule up here as
Yeah,
well.
I
Do you
have
want to go
like
Eagles first?
I've got both schedules written out. I have my wins losses written out too. So,
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So yeah, let's
all
start
right.
with the Eagles and yeah, let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, I'll go game by game. I'll give like maybe one sentence about it, but okay, Eagles at Lions this Sunday, week 1 should be a win. I mean, no questions really about it. I mean, Dan Campbell, and I mean, yeah, he's a fiery coach, but Lions on paper the Eagles are better. So I'm giving the Eagles a win. That's 1-0. Week 2, Eagles hosting the Vikings. I'm gonna give them the loss on that one, losing their home
Okay.
opener. Um, so then Eagles at Commanders. I have them winning. redemption game for Carson Wentz, I guess. So that's 2-1. Eagles versus hosting the Jaguars week 4. Eagles should win that. Return of Doug Peterson, sure, whatever you want the headlines to
Re-
be.
Real quick to jump in here, just because the first 4 games of the season were something that I kind of looked at.
Yeah,
And it's like the Jacksonville game is interesting just because you have the storyline of Doug Peterson coming back to Philadelphia, but at the same time, Jacksonville is one of those teams I'm really curious to see what kind of a step they take this year. Not necessarily success fully as a team, but I think Trevor Lawrence can progress to the point where he can win the Jaguars some games this season. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to give the Eagles a loss. I still have them winning that game here. But
okay.
another reason that I wanted to pause here is that I think that this schedule set up, the Eagles could easily rip off a 4-0 start to the season
Yeah,
and start the season 4-0 with the way that this schedule begins.
I think they could. I feel like there's going to be a loss in there. I think it's either the Vikings or the Jaguars, which you were right to mention. So I don't know. I can see them going 3-1. That's more realistic to me,
Three and
but it
one for
wouldn't
this stretch.
surprise me if they
Okay,
went
well,
4-0 to
why
start
don't
off.
you give us the next 2 games before the bye week, and then I want to kind of comment on that as well.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Week 5, traveling to Arizona to face the Cardinals. I give them the loss. 3-2 is the record at that point. Week 6, Eagles hosting the Cowboys. I give the Eagles the win in Philly. So that's 4-2 going into the bye. I don't know if you have any comments on that or if
Yeah,
you
no, I
think,
mean, I think the interesting part about the schedule, because like I just said, I could see them going 4-0 off the start, but I think that Minnesota could be a tough game. Jacksonville, there's a couple question marks, but then Arizona and Dallas are a couple of interesting games. In Arizona, I'm kind of with you. I think that that's a game that they could lose, but overall, I want to say through this stretch of games, I had them going 4-2 to start the season. Is that what you had as well?
yeah, 4-2 going into the
So
bye.
I don't know whether it's going to be that Minnesota game. Maybe they get kind of shocked a little bit on the road against Washington if Carson Wentz is playing with an edge. I
Nah.
don't know, but at the end of the day, I see them going. I think this is a stretch of games where if they're 4-2 at that point, I think you're pretty happy with where the Eagles are sitting, and I think that's kind of the most likely scenario.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not 4-2 at least, then that's a bit disappointing. Then the perspective shifts a little bit, but
Yeah,
yeah.
why don't you jump into the next 3 games? How about?
Okay, so weeks 8, 9, and 10, they
Yep.
all win. Steelers hosting the Steelers. Sorry, no offense to you, but I think they're just better on paper. Then at the
I mean, and
Texans,
and coming out of the bye is going to be an
yeah,
advantage Eagles there.
yeah. Then at the Texans, Davis Mills, man. I mean, the Texans roster's not great, so I'll give
Yeah,
them the
both
win. And
both teams
then
playing on a short week, but I mean, it's
yeah,
the Houston's dealing with the same thing as well.
yeah. Then week 10, hosting the Commanders this time around. I think the Eagles will sweep. That's just how I see it.
I'm with you on that. I think if the Commanders are going to win one of the 2 games, it's more likely it's that week 3 matchup. This one, the Eagles obviously going from a Thursday to a Monday are going to have plenty of time in between to game plan, and
Yeah,
they're just the better team on paper than Washington. So I'm also with you. At this point, I had the Eagles at 7-2.
yeah. So weeks 11 and 12, Eagles at the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts. I think they're going to lose that. Um, I think that'll be close, but I think the Colts just have the edge on that. Then
Mhm.
Eagles hosting the Packers. It's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, come on. Like, yeah, we beat him a couple seasons ago, but it's tough. It's tough playing against Aaron Rodgers. So I think the Packers win that too. So that's 7-4. Um, then the next 3 games, weeks
Well,
13,
wait.
14.
All
Oh,
right.
yeah,
So
we won.
this is a little bit different from me because I kind of viewed it as Indianapolis, Green Bay, and then Week 13, which would be Tennessee.
Yeah,
I had them losing 2 of those 3 games. I think that Indianapolis is one that they could potentially lose, and then I think either one of the 2 games, whether it's Green Bay or Tennessee, both 2 quality teams, I could see them losing one of those 2. So I think we were kind of in the same spot there. If you had them beating Tennessee, I'll also say they beat Tennessee,
yeah,
but they
I
lose to
do.
Green Bay, and then I
Yeah.
think we'd both have them at 8-4, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
8-4 up until week 12. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and you
week
have
week
them. You
13, I
you
said.
have them. You have them conceivably beating Tennessee.
Yes, I think they
All right,
should.
so we're kind of in lockstep here with what their record would be at this point.
Yes. And
All
then
right, then they get into a little bit of a soft spot in their schedule.
yeah, but even though it's a soft spot, they're on the road for the next 3 games. So
Yeah.
um the Eagles at the Giants, I think the Eagles will win. Um, yeah, it means the Giants. They're meh. They're all right, not really. But then week 15, Eagles at the Bears. The Bears are not good. So I mean, that's I feel like another win. Then the Eagles at the Cowboys. That is the one that could determine who wins the division. I have them losing at Dallas. Um,
That's a
I
Christmas Eve game
think,
too.
yeah, I think they're gonna split. I don't think the Cowboys will sweep again like they have like the last couple seasons, but I think the Eagles just lose this one in Dallas. So
Yeah, I
at
mean
this
that's
point, what's the
the three
record?
games in a row is tough, and I was also with you. I mean, the Giants and the Bears are inferior opponents. If the Eagles are healthy, obviously that's this whole hypothetical is based on no major injuries and everything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
But but yeah, I think that third game in a row, being against Dallas in Dallas, I think that's one that they could potentially drop. So I'm also in lockstep with you here. That brings them to what, ten
10
and
and
five,
5. Yeah.
10 and 5.
So then the Eagles to close out the season have two home games at versus the Saints and versus the Giants. The Saints is a really interesting one. I feel like that could be a potential loss, but I have them winning. I have them winning the
I
last
I
two games.
circled I circled that Saints game as kind of like the toss up for the season. Like if they
Yeah,
beat the Saints and then they take care of business against the Giants, that is probably still good enough to conceivably win the division.
I would say so. Yeah. So with that being said, that would be 12 and 5 to end the record. And I think the Eagles will win the NFC East and get probably the fourth seed. I mean, the Bucks, the Packers, and Rams will get the first three seeds most likely. So, um, yeah, I think it's going
I
to be
mean, 12
very
and 12 and
close.
5 is pretty good. I mean, 12
Yeah,
and 5 could still be good enough to be, a 2 or 3 seed in the NFC.
I don't know.
Especially
Yeah,
especially if teams, I mean, the AFC West might be tough or the NFC West might be tough with the Cardinals, the Rams, and the
it's
49ers
true.
all beating up on each other. I mean, if the Eagles can go in there and take care of business against the Commanders and the Giants and split with the Cowboys, maybe the Giants falter in a game against the Cowboys. The Cowboys also won the division last year. So they're playing a
Yeah,
first place schedule versus the Eagles who have the second place schedule. I don't know if that's
yeah.
necessarily enough, but it's also a factor.
And also, I mean, for the last, what, 15, 20 years, there's not been an NFC East repeat division winner
Yeah.
since the Eagles, basically. And they did three seasons under Andy Reid. I think it was 2003, 2005, something along those lines. But
The Eagles have a really good roster, and if Jalen Hurts is the guy, there's no reason that they can't be a serious contender in the NFC. And I'm with you. I have them winning the division. I think that they are going to beat out the Cowboys for the first spot in the NFC East.
I really hope so because, I mean, I have the Eagles as their floor 9 and 8, which would be, I mean, at that point, if that happens, Jalen Hurts, I think, is gone. I There's just so much pressure on Jalen Hurts to deliver. Like it's really like it's really tough because I mean there's no other way people are going to look at it and say if the Eagles get 9 and 8, I mean all eyes are going straight for
They're
Jalen
gonna.
Hurts. That's
You'd have to imagine. You'd have to imagine that the two. I mean, we talked about this with who's under the most pressure. If they're 9 and 8, then the reason has to be either Jalen Hurts isn't the guy or Jonathan Gannon has no clue what he's doing on when
that's
it comes
yeah,
to being a defensive coordinator.
yeah. I
Because there's
mean
too much talent on this Eagles team to not win at least what'd you say
10.
their floor was 9 and 8?
Yeah, 9 and 8
I
is the
mean,
floor.
they should be able to win 10 or 11 games with this
I
schedule.
think they should too, but
Their real tough stretch of games is those 3 road games in a row. But even
yeah,
given that, I mean, 2 of them are the Eagles and the Bears. So I mean, you're right. There's pressure on the Eagles this year because they have the rest of the roster is good to go. The rest
yeah,
of the roster is
exactly.
ready to win. They are legitimately a Super Bowl caliber roster as long as they have the right quarterback in place and Jonathan Gannon can handle the defensive responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I have their ceiling as 13 and 4. That's I feel a little too optimistic, even though it's one more win. But um,
It's
I don't know.
it's I think it's also feasible. It's also
Yeah,
that I think that's a feasible mark.
yeah. So I mean, 10 to 11 wins is more realistic. I think 12 and 5 is look reasonable enough.
Mhm.
But 9 and 8, yeah, it's just a disappointment. I think at that point they're missing the playoffs, but or maybe it's enough because the NFC is not loaded necessarily like the AFC is. So still, it's the Eagles who have to win the division. I mean, they should. They should. Dallas has gotten
What was their
worse.
record last year when they squeaked into the with the
I
last wild
believe
card
it was
spot?
9-8.
It was 9-8, right? And I
Yeah,
mean the NFC, like you said, the NFC is a little bit weak, but I mean you got to get to at least 10 wins.
yeah, they should. They really
Yeah.
should. But
And I mean, even then, it might be. I mean, I think for you, at least, everything we're talking about, that'd still be a little bit of a disappointment.
yeah, it would because I mean the roster's better than Dallas's on paper, but well, I mean anything can happen. So that's just how we see it before the seasons begin. So
Yes, correct. All right, so I think we'll move on to the Steelers now.
yep,
Um, so I'll break this down. I'll give you the first four games here because I think the first four games is a lot of winnable stuff for the Steelers. At Cincinnati, Week 1. We'll get into that game in a second, but right now I'm just going to give them the loss. Cincinnati's a good team,
yeah,
but we'll dive into the Week 1 preview in a little bit. Then Week 2 against New England, I think that's going to be a little bit of a toss-up. They're at home, so I'm going to give them the win there, coming off of the loss. Then they go
hmm
into Cleveland for Week 3. No Deshaun Watson. The game's on a Thursday, so both teams on obviously short rest. I'm going to have the Steelers and Mike Tomlin just getting the win. Like I said, no Deshaun Watson. And then Week 4, at home against the Jets. I'm actually going to be in the stadium for that game. I'm going with a family friend who is a Jets fan. We're going to be going out to Pittsburgh together to watch that.
Oh, that's
The
awesome.
Jets could the Jets could surprise here if Zach Wilson's back and he's taking a step forward. I could see the Jets surprising here, but I'm going to give the Steelers the win, and I think they get off to a good start, 3-1 to start the season.
And that's interesting because I even without Deshaun Watson, that's the game I circle. I agree with everything else. Just the Browns game, I know like that roster is pretty good overall. Like it's Jacoby Brissett should be good enough to where I think they just squeeze out a win because it's at home too. But um, I feel like me personally, I have them at 2-2, so I'm one game off with you on that one.
You have him 2-2. Okay. Yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough. So then the next four games, the schedule gets pretty tough
brutal.
because then they go into Buffalo. I'm gonna just give them a loss there. Buffalo's an extremely talented roster. I don't need to get into that too much.
Yeah,
Then they're home against Tampa Bay. I'm also gonna give them the loss here. And then they're at Miami. This is one of those games that, at Miami, Brian Flores returning down to
yeah,
Miami. Do the Steelers get up a little bit more for their assistant coach? So I'm going to give them the win there. And then
yeah,
at Philadelphia, I'm going to give them the loss. We already talked about that. So this
yeah.
4-game stretch, this is a tough stretch of games that I thought I definitely see them losing 3 of 4.
Mhm.
And I think this is when the fans, if they go on a 2-game losing streak against Buffalo and Tampa Bay, that's when the fans are going to start calling for Kenny Pickett. And I think that if the Steelers are going to make a move to Kenny Pickett this season, this is when it's going to be after that loss to Philadelphia, going into the bye week. Give Kenny Pickett the extra week to get ready for New Orleans, who New Orleans is a good team, but it's not like you're going up against one of the best teams in the NFL. So that's when I could see them potentially making the move to Kenny Pickett if they're going to do it. Again, at
Yeah,
this point, I would have them sitting at 4-4 going into the bye. So maybe the Steelers are like, hey, we're 500. We're in the hunt. We're going to stick with the veteran Mitch Trubisky. But then at that point, I think the Steelers are probably just going to ride him out for the whole season unless they want to get Kenny Pickett in there for a game or two if they get eliminated early. So that's kind of how
mhm.
I see the first 8 games of the season before the bye week going.
Yeah. I have them at 3-5, and at that point, man, that's tough because yeah, Pickett will definitely be called for by the fans. So, man, that's
What game do you have them winning of those 4?
yeah, the Dolphins game as well.
The Dolphins game,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I like the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are going to be a solid team this year, but I mean, if the Steelers are losing 4 in a row at that stretch, then yeah, I think there's no question that the fan
they'll
base
be
is going to erupt
desperate.
if they don't go to Kenny Pickett. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so then they have the bye week. I have them coming out of the bye, whether it's Pickett or whether it's Trubisky. I think they're going to win on that extra week at home against New Orleans.
yeah,
Um, so they're 5-4 at that point. Then they're home against Cincinnati. I think it'll be a close game. The Steelers did well last year holding Jamar Chase. They didn't really let him explode for any big games. So I think that they can kind of do the same thing. And
yeah,
I think it'll be a close game, but I'm going to give it to Cincinnati. That's a loss. Then they're in Indianapolis. I think Indianapolis is going to win their division this year. I have that being a loss.
yeah.
And then they have a back-to-back road games at Atlanta. I have them beating Atlanta. I don't think Atlanta is going to be that good this year. They don't really have a lot of weapons on offense. So at this point, I have them sitting at 6-6 after that game against Atlanta.
Yeah, so Those the next four. You said the Saints. They beat the Saints and the Falcons.
They beat the
Right.
Saints and the Falcons, lose to Cincinnati and Indianapolis.
That's what I also have. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so you have their record as what, 5-7?
Yeah. Yeah. Five
Okay.
and seven.
So then their next two games, rival game at home against Baltimore. I think the Steelers get up for it and they win that game. It's going to be a big game. For really that I mean, I think at this point in the season with where they'd be at, I had them at 6-7, you had them at 5. I had them at 6-6, you had them at 5-7. That game against rival Baltimore could be what makes or breaks whether they're going to be in the wild card hunt for the rest of the
Yeah.
season. So I have them getting up and winning that game. And then they follow up the next week going down to Carolina. I think Carolina's going to be solid, but again, I think it's beatable, and I think that's a game that they can win on the road. So that would be 3 wins in a row, and that's when I think fans would really start to be like, "Hey, maybe this team can get in as a wild card team." And I would have them as 8-6, with this kind of really being the pinnacle of their season.
Yeah. So I also have them winning at against the Ravens and the Panthers. So I think that's 7-7 for me.
You would have them at 7-7. I'd have them at 8-6, squarely in the wild card hunt, maybe even in the division if the Browns and Bengals and Ravens have been beating up on each other.
Yeah.
Then their schedule stiffens up for the last 3 games to close out the season. I
Yeah.
think Las Vegas is getting slept on as a team that can make a could honestly, I think Las Vegas could win their division. Um, but I have them. I have them. I know it's a hot take. I'd love to get into it more, but this isn't speaking Raiders, so
Yeah.
I have them losing to the Raiders. Um, then I have them going into Baltimore, also losing. I think the Ravens, that's a game that they could potentially need for the division. So I think the Ravens take care of business at home against the Steelers. And then I think they close out the season. At this point, they're 8-8. I have them closing out the season at home against Cleveland. The Steelers are going to need to win that game to keep Mike Tomlin's 500 streak alive.
Yeah.
So, of every season being above 500. So I think they get up for that game at home and they beat the Browns at home. And they close the
So
season 9-8.
so I agree with you with everything. Yeah, I agreed with you on the last three ones. Against the Raiders, lost against the Ravens, and then a win against the Browns. What for me, since I have one, so it'd be 8 and 9 because I think we're off on
Yeah, our
the
difference was the
thing.
first Cleveland game.
Yeah, yeah. So I have them at 8 and 9
Man,
with
you're really
wood
doing
growing.
Mike Tomlin dirty like
I
that. I see
really,
how it
it's
is,
just
Ricardo.
so tough, man. I was like, I can't do this to him, but I don't know. I feel like that's I don't know. It's a tough schedule, like tougher than the Eagles, I'd say. But
Now,
I
I'll
mean,
say
yeah,
I do think it's a tougher schedule with the Eagles. I'll give you that. Um, Here's what I have to say. As far as their floor, I mean, this offensive line is so bad.
yeah,
I could see them going. I could see them getting 4 wins. I think that would be like worst case scenario. Would be this offensive line is putrid. Every single game they're just getting run over. They can't create any holes for Najee Harris. The
yeah,
Steelers don't send Kenny Pickett out there at all because of how bad the offensive line is, and they literally go 4-4, and I don't even know what that would be. That'd be 4-13.
13, yeah,
Um, as far as their ceiling goes, if they figure things out, I don't think it's much more than 9 wins. I think maybe
yeah,
they go 10-7 would be their absolute ceiling. But I think this is a team that's going to be in the wild card convo all year. Um, I think the conversation's possibly going to be, hey, could they sneak in as the last wild card team? Just because of how tough this division is, all 4 of these teams are good teams. I think they're going to mathematically be in the division hunt, but at the end of the day, I think that the Bengals and the Ravens are better teams than them, and they're going to be the real ones competing for the division. So I have them really being legitimately in the wild card hunt, and to a lesser extent, um, being in the division hunt. And I ultimately have the Bengals winning the division, the
yeah,
Ravens coming in second in the division, the Steelers third, and then the Browns fourth. I really don't buy into the Browns at all, given how long Deshaun Watson's going to be out, and I think they're still going to be beatable throughout most of the season. And then, even when Deshaun Watson is back, that last game of the season, I have the Steelers winning. So I have the
yeah,
Steelers finishing third and just, on the cusp of being a wild card team. Obviously,
yeah,
the AFC is really tough this year, so 9-8 probably isn't good enough to get in.
yeah. Probably not. I also have them finishing third with the Bengals winning, as you said, and the Ravens second, Browns last. Although I think they could get. I mean, their floor I think is 5 wins, but I
Mhm.
mean it's a 1 win difference between the two of us. And ceiling, I agree with you. Absolute ceiling, yes, 10-7, and then 9-8 is I feel like realistic enough.
Yeah, I think that, kind of everybody has them anywhere from a realistic goal being like 8 to 10 wins. I think like that's kind of
Yeah.
given this roster, given the holes on the offensive line, given the quarterback situation, if they can hover around 500 and be in the wild card hunt, that's a good season for the Steelers team.
Yeah, I think they will. They should be able to. They're always competitive under Mike Tomlin. I mean, well, what's the streak now at this point for Mike Tomlin with?
He's never had a losing season. He's never
Yeah,
had a losing season since he came into the NFL. I should know this, but I want to say '08 was his first year. It might have been it might have actually been the year
yeah.
that they won the Super Bowl.
I
I don't
think you're
remember
right
off the
on that.
top of my
Yeah,
head.
but I mean, since then, I mean
No
that's
losing
just
seasons. He's never had a losing season.
exactly.
I think that this roster, while it has question marks, they're still going to find a way to get it done and get to 9 wins.
Yeah, that's why it pains me that much more to give him a losing record for the first time under
Yeah, I
Tomlin.
can't
But
I can't do it, Ricardo, but it's fine if you, the Eagles fan, want to.
no, it
I'm out
hurts
here
me
all in
too.
on the Eagles. Eagles are gonna have 12 wins. They're gonna win the division. They're a sleeper to win the Super Bowl. And Ricardo's out here can't even give Mike Tomlin another 500 season. I see how it is, Ricardo.
Hey man, at least I gave them their ceiling as 9-8. I mean, no, I don't know. Like 8 or 9 wins, it's gonna happen, but it's just that one game that really is tough for me to give. I
Yeah,
don't know.
fair enough. But I think we're in pretty close lockstep about what each of these teams are going to do. So,
Yeah, yeah.
that being said, let's talk about Week 1 a little bit. Is there anything that you have your eyes on for the Steelers? Anything that you want to talk about that you are going to be you're interested in seeing how Week 1 unfolds here as the Eagles are heading up to Detroit to face the Lions?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Jalen Hurts obviously
Also,
being the
just to note, the Eagles are 4-point favorites in that road opener against the Lions.
yeah, I mean, oof, gotta start betting again, gambling. I don't know. I feel like
I
that
was
might
like,
be.
I got to bet that spread.
I was gonna say I might bet that spread, but yeah. But anyway, Jalen Hurts obviously with his new weapon and AJ Brown. I mean that connection we'll see, and then sort of how the rest of the offense is like plays just in general because Devontae Smith's more of like the second receiver now. AJ Brown obviously the star, the ex receiver, the best one on the team, and then Dallas Goddard as a tight end up the middle. I mean that's gonna be a nightmare for any team really to try and defend. I mean, you might double AJ, but that leaves Devontae Smith open one on one. I mean, he's a really good route runner. Then Dallas Goddard against a linebacker safety. I mean, that's a mismatch. And then running back situation. I don't know that's a bit iffy. Miles Sanders might not play. He's, I believe, still out, not practicing yet. Um, but I mean, Jalen Hurts. Yeah, obviously it comes down to him. That's just how it is. So he's the biggest. I mean, in literally every game, it's going to be him.
Yeah.
My attention is going to be drawn to him. So see how he
I think
plays. And
I think the big thing for the Eagles too is I think that we're going to see them be very run heavy. When you look at their game from last year, they literally rushed against this Lions defense for 236 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. I mean, we talked about how the Eagles are going to look to be more balanced on their offensive attack this season, but I mean, it's not like the Lions did anything overwhelming to improve their defensive line. When it comes to stopping the run, obviously Aiden Hutchinson was their big free
yeah,
agent, but he's more of a refined pass rusher at this stage. So I think the Eagles, even though they are going to try and be more balanced, I think kind of taking advantage of the fact that they can run against this Detroit Lions team is how they're really going to take care of business against them. When it comes to moving the ball offensively.
yeah, definitely. And then I guess the other thing I'm sort of interested in is rookie contributions. Cam Jurgens, I don't think is going to play because
Yeah,
Jason Kelsey's back in practice, so he's on track to play Sunday against the Lions. And then N'Kobe Dean, Reed Blankenship, the safety, and then Jordan Davis. See like rotationally how many snaps they get. It probably won't be that many for the three of them at least. But still to see if they log a stat or anything like that to see um, you know, week one, their first real action in the NFL to see
yeah,
how they perform, if they play at all, but they probably will at least a little bit.
certainly. And obviously the one thing we've banged the drum on this all preseason, all training camp, but just seeing week one and even maybe even into week two, is there any rust on this defense
Yeah,
when it comes to
yeah,
tackling and when it comes to execution of just tackling and making the right defensive stops? Because
mhm.
obviously the Eagles didn't tackle to the ground in training camp. We saw a bit of the rust or the lack of form in some of the preseason games. So to see if that carries over and if we see guys just kind of not really in game in NFL game form to start the season is another thing that I think we both have our eye on, and we'll
Yeah,
be talking about next week when we kind of break down these games.
yeah,
For
definitely.
sure is something that we each have our eye on. Any
Yeah,
other notes before I touch on the Steelers game briefly?
I mean, there's kicker punt return duties. I mean, Kenny Gainwell probably getting those, but other than that, no, those are the pretty big ones to watch.
So as for the Steelers and Bengals, the Bengals open it up as a 6.5 point favorite, which honestly, when I was looking at the lines, I mean, neither of us are any gambling experts by any stretch of the imagination,
Yeah,
but to see the Bengals favored by 6.5 when the Steelers are a solid team and
yeah,
they played each other close last year, and the Lions, who the Eagles beat the Lions like what 41-6 last year,
yeah.
and the Eagles have a much better roster than the Lions do. I mean, I'm shocked that the Eagles aren't favored by more, and that the spread on the Bengals is so basically a touchdown at this point.
Yeah,
Um, so I mean, honestly, one of the main things I have my eye on is really the trenches for the Steelers.
yeah,
How the defensive line for the Steelers fares, really in their first test of the season. I've talked about how that's kind of one of their biggest weaknesses on defense is stopping the run, and they're going to get a test right away against Joe Mixon. And the Bengals have an improved offensive line. They brought in La'el
hmm,
Collins. They brought in the center, I believe, from New England. I forget what his name was. Is it like Ed Carrows or something like that?
yeah,
I don't
yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah.
what his name was, but they brought in the center. So they've got an improved offensive line. So we're going to see right from the shoot how much better is this Steelers defensive line with the healthy Tyson Alualu and Larry Ogunjobi in there. That's one of the main things I have my eye on. And then when you flip it around to the Steelers, I'm going to be looking at this offensive line all season. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. Um, Genuinely curious about that. Not that necessarily you look at this Bengals team and you say, hey, this is a big test. They're going up against this pass rusher. But Trey Hendrickson is someone that slept on a little bit. Last year, he had 14 sacks on the season. So,
Yeah.
we're going to see how this Bengals team, does against this offensive line, and if the Steelers can hold up and create any holes for Najee Harris and just, keep Trubisky upright so he's not running for his life the whole time. So those are really the two main things I'm looking for. Also curious to see, all three of these wide receivers on the field. I'm excited to see it. Pat Fryermuth as well, the talented tight end. So it's exciting. It's week one, and we'll certainly have plenty to break down as this week one commences and we get going into the regular season here.
Yeah. Now I have a question for you before the season starts. Do you think George Pickens has a shot at winning Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yes, I think he a shot. Yes,
Okay.
if I had to put money on if he was going to make it, I'd want to go around the league a little bit and see who are the guys that are really going to get a lot of opportunities. But everything we've seen from training camp, and obviously he had the one really good preseason game, week one,
Yeah.
where he caught a touchdown. There's no reason why he certainly shouldn't be in the conversation, and I believe he's one of the favorites at this point to
Yeah.
win the award. So I certainly think he has the chance to win it, but I don't know if I would go out and necessarily put money on it right away.
Fair. That's fair. I just wanted to see your take on that.
Does Jordan Davis win Defensive Rookie of the Year?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
No.
All right. Fair enough. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here, Ricardo?
No, man, it's almost here. Oh my god, yeah. So so
Last
close.
episode, man. Last episode
Agonizingly
before we start
close,
things
yeah.
off. Yeah.
I'm so
All right,
excited.
man. Always a pleasure doing these shows with you, and I think that just about brings us to the end of this episode. And thank you everyone for listening in. Whenever you do tune in and check this out, Steelers and Eagles football is basically back, baby. It's time. Everybody enjoy the games this weekend. Hopefully the Steelers and Eagles can pull out some wins, and we'll be talking to you next week when we break down the action from these week one games. Bye. Have a good one.